Um, After this, you're gonna hear the horrible things they do to children. As you can see, the title is trauma, child trauma. What they do to children, things that's horrible. I just heard somebody say, "Our 4-year-old." Um, it's very well documented that children are tortured in horrible ways, of all ages, infants included. Included. And I'm listening to this trash talking to me, wanting me to somehow think that he's protective of children. This bottom feeder will be torturing children, if he hasn't yet, or at least he's working for a program that does torture children, traumatize them in so many ways, and for the rest of their life probably be with them. And the reason why he does that is because he wants me to not see things for what they are. Now, first of all, this shit talking to me is working for a governmental entity that has issues with pedophilia. There's been a lot of problem with pedophilia, and an issue that's been ongoing for these agencies to the point where there's a bill called N National Defense Abuse Act. And I remember them saying, "Now we reformed," as in there's not a lot of pedophiles in this agency anymore. When the truth is, obviously, that's not the case. Um, this bill, if anything, showed an issue, and they don't even talk too much about that because this bill was supposed to limit the amount of child porn downloaded by employees working at DoD using the DoD computers. That alone should tell you how much they care about kids and the issue that's ongoing there. But forget about even that. The program itself does horrible things to children. Horrible things to children. We talk about Department of Defense used on children of all ages, infants inclusive. To hear this trash say a 4-year-old knows that I'm going to listen to, and you're going to hear what they do to children as young as, I mean, you're going to hear a 3-week-old being tortured, but a 4-year-old with Down syndrome, you'll hear a testimony of that happening. Now, this piece of shit tell me I'm going to be castrated and tortured. I'd rather be tortured in every ways than be involved in a program that does these things to children. He knows that I see that trash as a pedophile in a low life. Because what's happening today is, as a target individual, we are forced to get sexual stimulation to our children. It's part of this breakdown tactics they use on so many of us. And then they try to make you believe these things. I understand at this point this is part of this cognitive warfare that we're test subject to. The way they manipulate us is way they're training using test subject on how a human brain can be crushed and tormented. And one thing that always works is going to be this pedophilia type of torture. That's why people around you make those noise campaigns. You hear this because I see things for what they are, but there's no escapism. When I see a man try to play this protectors of children, I know what this piece of shit is involved actually. I see him as a lowlife that can't even say a pedophile's name. And so for me, I have accepted the reality. And I know this piece of shit is acting accordingly. And matter of fact, he's method acting because he needs to stay in character. Because he knows the reality of what he's involved in, what it means, and what it does, and who it targets. As a test subject in this program, what it means to me, it means that I'm no longer being myself. It means that I'm going to be forced to get some stimulations that are aimed toward children for the purpose of breaking me down. And you have these bottom feeders who's supposed to act accordingly. This method acting as they try to make you accept these things. And they say things are 4-year-old. When I know they torture children as young as 4, even younger than that actually, 3-week-old infants. You're gonna hear that. So now they were trying to be like, oh, we're gonna make it sound like we're protecting our kids. We know what you guys do to kids. They are the threat to children, 4-year-old who would be tortured if they are children of target individuals or they're in surrounded or somehow in the surroundings of a target individual. If they're the student of a target individual, if they're the kids of the target individual, they will torture them, and inclusive of sexual torture. And they have these bottom feeders who've been doing these nasty things to so many others, thinking that I'm going to let them live their fantasy. What's going to happen to me is going to be horrible. I expect that. But from people who torture children, they try to create all psyops possible. You know, it's funny, they tell me how they hate me. I was like, what do you think, I love you? What do you think I think of you? I pray to God to give me strength to not even do anything harmful to this piece of shit, because I truly see the threat they are to children. I'm sorry when I speak with these emotions, but it's just sometimes when I hear these acting gigs, these characters they play, I get lost in these gigs, in these gimmicks, in these characters they've created. When in reality, it's like they don't give a shit about children. They torture children. What they want me to see them as is like protecting children. You know, the reason why I call this video child trauma is because you heard what they try to use. They vilify you any way possible. And one thing they like to enjoy using to try to make me accept this psyop as they're protecting. For example, they say I'm 4-year-old. The reason why they're saying that is because they try to make me think of what I did to myself when I was a child. But it try to create this version that is exaggerated. But not even that. Now it gets even to the point where even to the point where me talking about when I was like using me in middle school, using my 2 fingers to hit the forearm. It's like that's the abuse. You're gonna hear the torture of what they do to children. Right, so you understand these people traumatize children in ways that you can't even understand because they're using defense weapons onto children. Matter of fact, you're gonna hear the mass shooting that just traumatized a 10-year-old who survived the mass shooting. She got shot in the leg when these bottom feeders are here pushing people into insanity. And then you're gonna hear the obvious issues that these entities have with children. By every means, you hear how horrible they are. Now, for me, when I think about this, the actual inappropriate act of what I did as a child, not this bullshit they try to like use this to hit the 2 things. This is what they try to create because they want me to imagine harming a child in that way, the way they harm their children or harm the children they torture in the program. So for them, it's like, no, the 2 things you do, those 2 things, you hit her forearm like that, bah. Trash. That's why they are zapping genitals of children. So, for me, they try to find ways to now you traumatize this person. For she doesn't even know me. But what you guys do, who you've traumatized, is well documented. These kids are never going to be the same. You're going to hear a woman, me, and my young child being abused and have been damaged physically and psychologically. This child is never going to be normal. She's going to be traumatized because she's a test subject. I don't know how young is her young child, but she's a young child. She's a kid. Maybe a 4-year-old too. Just like the 4-year-old that they torture who has Down syndrome. This piece of shit tortured children. What you're going to see next is a picture of me in middle school. And imagine trying to vilify a child at that age. The real inappropriate thing I did to myself, which they wanted to be sexual abuse, which unfortunately for them is not really the case, but it's still inappropriate, is something they tried to exaggerate into something else. That's why you hear the noise came. Oh, well, I don't know if that's what, but they time things around. Because the reality of what they do to children is nasty. And so what they try to do is vilify what a child did inappropriately, and then even try to exaggerate what he did inappropriately, and then even try to create some, oh no, you abused her by hitting the 2 things on the... While you're going to hear the actual things they do to children. The sexual torture, the suffocations, the manipulations, getting them sick, the radiations, all of that. Mothers and their young children being traumatized by this technology. Physically and psychologically by bottom feeders, torturing babies, working for governmental entities filled with pedophiles. And then do the pedophilia type of torture. So today, as a grown man, I was watching this ad. There was a man playing. That's a typical ad. There's some 10, 11-year-old stimulations. I was about to take a screenshot. They changed it immediately because they want that. The things they do, typical things to try to get this torment. Then at the end, you're gonna hear the man that was just so tormented to a point that he killed 18 people, shooting a kid, to actually killing a child, a 14-year-old, and shooting a child's leg. Thankfully, the bullet didn't just grazed it, didn't go through her leg. A 10-year-old, these bottom feeders are here, our children. Our 4-year-old, you're going to hear a 4-year-old torture. You're going to hear a 3-year-old torture. You're going to hear a 7-year-old torture. You're going to hear a 3-week-old torture by this trash. I rather get my penis cut up in pieces, my testicle ripped off, than be involved in this. Because you know these kids have been traumatized by this low life. Now God gave me strength for what I'm going to go through, but this bottom feeders has sold their soul to pedophiles, and they're going to be reimbursed the right way. Death comes to all of us. I think they wanted to escape in this fantasy. They wanted to create this fantasy, make themselves believe with, now you're traumatized. No, trust, you are the one involved in the program that traumatized children. Now you're out here creating a storyline to make yourself believe that you're not the trash that you are. And what you do is what trash do. Tell me how they said we're going to frame me. Yes, people who torture children will frame with no problem. You do what you do. Trash will be trash. Trash will do trashy things and then try to create this fantasy of theirs. No. For all the women and children you guys have been torturing, traumatizing, destroying, you'll be reimbursed. But you're trash and you're a coward. So do the coward trashy things you do. And then you'll be watching like a proper coward trash that you are. Listen to the nasty things they do. And understand who is traumatizing who. Who's traumatizing children. Let these bottom feeders watch as they wait for what's going to happen to them.
Pathologist working in private practice with young children. I had a 7-year-old client who has autism, and she was the most significantly affected of all of my clients. I eventually had to tell this client to go to another clinic, and they used her to threaten the most torture in me as well as their most extreme forms of torture. For several months, she would cry and scream horribly during our therapy sessions despite having a great day at school. This was highly unusual behavior for her, as she usually behaved very well during her therapy sessions and had been making incredible progress on all of her therapy goals. This was used to threaten extreme torture on me, making me scream and cry, etc. They would make the kids act out the kinds of torture that would later be done on me. For example, they would also sometimes make her bite her hand, threatening to make me bite my hands, as they often do. One day, she had a large, severe bite mark on her arm. She has also grabbed her crotch, saying, "Ow," and this was used to threaten me with severe sexual torture. One day, I also observed her gasping for air a few times in the same way that I do when I am being more severely suffocated. The suffocation had been in a mild state for a while up until this point. Many of their torture methods are cyclical in severity. Right after I saw this child being suffocated, then I began to experience very extreme suffocation all day, every day, for about 2 months straight, and that's also when they made it worse when I eat. Then I also work with a 4-year-old little girl with Down syndrome, as well as her 5-year-old sister who also has Down syndrome. I observed both of these girls suddenly grabbing their genitals in pain and verbalizing, "Ow." I observed this at least on 1 or 2 occasions for each of them during their separate sessions. During one session, I observed one of my 3-year-old clients suddenly grab his crotch and lean forward in his chair. And then he made a frightening grimace of severe pain. I asked him what was wrong and if he needed to use the restroom, but he said no to having to use the restroom and was not able to verbalize anything more due to his language delay. He looked puzzled and bewildered. Even though I had stated that it was time to do more work right before this incident, I quickly just let him play another game, and he quickly returned to his joyful, happy self again.
Ms. Catherine Nestor.
Thanks. My name is Catherine Nestor, and I'm from Pennsylvania. This commission has spoken of a long history of abuse of the human research subject. Although no one mentioned MKUltra today, President Clinton recently apologized for this. My young child and I have been used as non-consensual test subjects. We have been subjected to COINTELPRO-like stalking, remote neural monitoring, and electromagnetic torture, resulting in psychological and physical damage. And I won't go into the details of that because I have 4 pages written in here that is very similar to Connie's testimony. Please do not wait 70 years to investigate this. I ask Dr. Amy Gutman to begin today. There is new work for the Commission for Human Subject Protection on our shores. And please give us a dramatic response, Susan. And please give us a congressional hearing. Thank you.
And have had a decent education. I live in El Dorado Hills, California, with my wife of 14 years, Lorna, and our 5 children. Nicole is 15, Patricia 14, Christopher 13, Dylan 9, and Avery 16 months old. Not only have I been going through this, but my entire family has suffered right by my side. We have all experienced the same type of harassment on different levels. We have all suffered the same symptoms while this harassment was going on. Some of our physical symptoms include severe tooth decay and vision loss, unexplained rashes and burns, severe headaches, mood swings, anxiety, thyroid problems, high blood pressure, heart problems, vision loss, and cancer. My children were born premature, which I attribute to this. Our son Dylan, now age 9, was born very premature. He was born at 31 weeks. During her pregnancy with Dylan, we were being targeted more so than other times. At the delivery, there were weird men walking and waiting around the hospital. Right outside our delivery room window, there was a white cargo van parked with 2 suspicious men inside. They were there the entire labor, a delivery. Our son had to be transported to another hospital 45 minutes away. When arriving to the Toa hospital, those same men and van were present. Three of my children have severe rashes that have not been explained by several doctors. These rashes have been present for several years at a time. If interested, I will gladly furnish you with detailed photos of the rashes. Our infant daughter, at 3 weeks old, was diagnosed with Lerner syndrome. This was after a severe rash appeared on her body after a few days of torture. We were told by a couple doctors to take her home and love her and spend the rest of the time we have with her. They told us she would ultimately die from this syndrome. Thank God that Lerner syndrome was not what affected our daughter. Doctors are still dumbfounded by her rash and symptoms. Sadly, we know that her symptoms were effects from the torture this poor innocent 3-week-old baby endured. Recently, I lost complete time. I exhibited the flashing lights. My 9-year-old son Dylan complained about the lights. You will often hear that vision is something that is greatly affected with this type of torture.
I am a victim of organized stalking, electronic harassment, microwave torture, B2K abuse, and I'm asking you to help us end this crime against humanity, which has impacted men, women, children all around the world.
Hi, I'm Wan from Malaysia. My family are targeted individuals. We are victims of cyber torture, and I will not give up. I will fight to the end.
But I was going to be shot in the face. And it was an older guy. He was like really, really disgruntled and pissed off. Yeah, she's going to be shot in the face. You know, sound like an angry ass old person. You know, then a couple of days later, a female said the same thing. Don't get shot in the face. You know, stupid shit like that. But what I really noticed is with the Voice of Skull, it's a bunch of females. You know, and I'm like, bro, really? You're not a woman. What real woman would stalk another female or sit back and allow that to go on? You really think they think it's nothing wrong with them, basically. You know, they call me a retarded bitch and all of this here.
From New York Times, I'm Michael Navarro. This is The Daily. Today, the mass shooting that occurred in Maine last week, killing 18 people, was the country's deadliest of the year. It may also have been one of the most avoidable.
Time when the local police are really made aware that this guy is a concern is about 5 months ago in May, when his ex-wife and teenage son go to a school resource officer, and the school resource officer calls down a sheriff's deputy to speak with the family. And in that interview, the teenage son and the ex-wife say that he has started to hear voices. He's started to be increasingly paranoid in West Point, New York, for an annual training exercise. And there's a very concerning incident that takes place. They're all hanging out together at a motel, and he starts accusing them of calling him a pedophile. This is one of his paranoid delusions that comes up repeatedly. He shoves one at one point.
Around others wounded. The first 911 call coming in around 7 p.m. from a local bowling alley that was hosting a youth night for a kids' bowling league.
We have an active shooter. We have multiple injuries.
Authorities releasing these surveillance images showing the suspect they're looking for. His name is Robert Card, and he's pictured armed with an AR-15 style rifle.
Mr. Card is considered armed and dangerous, and police advise that Maine people should not approach him under any circumstances.
Megan Hutchinson and her 10-year-old daughter Zoe were at the bowling alley. Zoe's leg grazed by a bullet.
I never thought I'd grow up and get a bullet in my leg. Why? Like, why do people do this?
After allegedly shooting several people inside the bowling alley, Card is believed to have traveled about 4 miles to a local bar and restaurant. Sources tell ABC News that Card has a history of military service and is a firearms instructor. He was treated at a
hoping Bill Young and his son would be among the survivors of the shooting here at the bowling alley. It's also been hard to process, especially since the manhunt has entered another day.
Grief comes in different ways, and for Rob Young, that includes anger.
Human waste, human scum. I'm sorry, I got no nice words.
They're harsh words for Robert Card, the man accused of shooting and killing at least 18 people at a bar and bowling alley in Lewiston Wednesday night. Among the victims are Rob's 43-year-old brother, Bill Young, and 14-year-old nephew, Aaron. They were at spare time recreation for Aaron's youth bowling league.
It's bad enough to lose my brother, but Aaron's 14. He has his whole life in front of him.
Rob flew in from Maryland as his family frantically searched for answers. Just hours after landing, he says a state trooper delivered the tragic news.
It feels like we're going to wake up and we're all going to...
Links to the proliferation of graphic material. Called Project Flicker, some 5,000 individuals have been identified as having subscriptions to child porn sites, including many DoD-affiliated persons. So this ongoing national investigation has now prompted the House to introduce a bipartisan bill that would help the DoD stop the use of its network to, quote, possess, procure, or produce child pornography. Joining us to discuss this, investigative journalist Ben Swan. So Ben, the Pentagon already takes measures to limit worker access to stuff like porn by rolling out what they call the Personal Electronic Device PED policy, where workers have to drop off their phones and lockers before entering their offices. All their online searches are accessible by security if or when needed. Their Wi-Fi access is monitored in digital security sweeps. So how is this happening?
Well, it's happening because even though there is a certain amount of limitation on access, those who are working in the Department of Defense, clearly it appears to be thousands of individuals in the Department of Defense, are finding ways around this, specifically by using the Department of Defense IP addresses and also apparently peer-to-peer sharing within the department's network. So this study that was done on this issue, and it is pretty horrifying, Manila, to consider this. It shows that the Department of Defense ranked 19th out of almost 3,000 networks in terms of peer-to-peer sharing of child pornography. That is absolutely incredible. This bill attempts to essentially say, look, we're not doing enough to stop it from coming in, but we're also not doing enough in the Department of Defense to go after those individuals who are being recognized as the ones who are perpetrating this.
So Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is the co-author to this bill. She said this, quote, "The notion that the Department of Defense's network and Pentagon-issued computers may be used to view, create, or circulate such horrifying images is a shameful disgrace and one we must fight head-on." Now, the fact that the Pentagon workers, be they civil or military or otherwise, already submit to a gauntlet of daily scrutiny just going in and out of work, is it fair then to the tens of thousands who are completely innocent to further allow that much more government intrusion into their, their digital devices or the things that they're dealing with on their computers?
Well, remember that what's being talked about here is not an intrusion into someone's personal device or even their home. This is about saying Department of Defense computers are being misused to share, to spread, to access child pornography. And when you step into an office, whether it's a Department of Defense office or it's the offices at RT America, wherever you go into an office, you do not have the right to simply use the technology within that office space however you want, and you certainly don't have the right to use it in a criminal manner. So essentially this bill is trying to do, again, two things. It's trying to limit that and crack down on the misuse of those computer systems, but it also is going after those individuals. One of the things that this bill attempts to do, and there's a Senate version of it put together by Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, but essentially what these two bills are trying to do is say, look, the Department of Defense does not have an adequate way of responding to this, of tracking down and investigating who as an individual is misusing these computers, who is sharing these pornographic images of children, who is sending them to whom. And so one of the things it does is the bill actually opens up civilian law enforcement to come in and to work with the Pentagon and with the DOD to actually investigate and to track down who is misusing, again, these computers for this purpose. So the bill, it's about more than just stopping it. It's about going after those who have been perpetrating it, who so far aren't being gone after.
Now, Ben, you and I, obviously, we're both parents here, and this is something that is terrifying, I think, to anybody that is a parent. What about the bigger... Infuriating. I mean, it's disgusting and maddening. The bigger picture here, Ben, how do we, the people, crack down on this? It's a disgusting crime. How is this continuing to proliferate in a day where they can track your every movement and what you do?
Well, because clearly in this case, these are the people who are helping to do the tracking. I know NSA and a lot of these civilian agencies do, but when you reach a certain point within these military spaces, a lot of these people apparently feel that they can go untouched. And so far, they pretty much have. About 80% of the cases where child pornography has been sent through these DOD servers have not been prosecuted, have not even been looked at or tracked down. 80% of them, Manila. So the majority of the people who are doing this through the Department of Defense are not having to pay any kind of price for it. I think this is a very serious issue, but it's also an issue that we need to recognize is a very real issue.
Yeah.
When people talk about child pornography or predators out there, we are being limited to a discussion of that, the creepy person who lives in a certain house, and that's where we want to talk about it. But when we talk about it on a bigger spectrum, military, government, those who are in power, people don't want to discuss it. It's a very real issue.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that there's some 25,000 people that go in and out of the Pentagon every single day. And a lot of these, I mean, they have to have some level of clearance to begin with. But I think some of the people that are not being prosecuted are some of the ones who have the highest clearances in this country. So that's kind of a scary thing to think about.
Some of these people we know have the highest classification in terms of classified access to information and material, and that's pretty scary.
That is scary that some of those people might be these gross individuals sharing this kind of information. All right, Ben Swan, as always, appreciate your take on this. Thank you.